You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty Podcast.
It is May 8th, 2023, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we are bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. And today we have with us Lars Mapstead, and he is a candidate for the 2024 Libertarian Party presidential nomination. And it's part of a series that we're doing on that so that we can introduce you to all of the candidates so that you can make an informed decision out there. And we have already talked to Lars a little bit about his background in an earlier show. Now today we're going to dig deep into some of the particular issues. So we've got a list of about 8 or 9 issues that we're going to go deep on. But before we get into that, let me introduce you to the rest of the panel. In our lower left-hand corner, we have our invisible hand, James Just. He is visible today in front of the camera.
And grumpy. Let's just remind us that I'm grumpy when I have to be on TV at this time of day.
Yeah, he's grumpy, but he should be excited because he was just reelected the Sacramento County Libertarian Party chair. So
excited is a word for it. Yes.
Okay. But anyways, so we're going to jump into these topics today, and to kick it off, well, first, James, can you real quick bring up Lars' webpage too, just so I can show people where it's at? So it's lars24.com, and you can go find out more about him, and we'll bring it up again at the end of the show. But first topic we wanted to dive into today is education, probably one of the most important topics, and we saw that, government monopolized education is always kind of a terrible thing. It, shuts down diversity of ideas, but even more to the point, it shuts down things when they don't even have the education running, which is what happened during the pandemic. I mean, they literally just shut everybody out of the schools, and it was like, good luck. And so it's turned out that kids have essentially fallen behind and lost about a year of education and development. So it's just, terrible on a lot of fronts, but it's also been a big boost for people thinking about school choice. We've had recent victories. Arizona has sort of been kind of leading the way on a sort of across the board choice, but there's been some other states following that as well. And we have a little map here from the Hoover Institute that shows, kind of how different states are doing. The darker the state, the more choice there is. So you look down here, like say at Florida, and you click on it, and they have all these different options. Whereas you go to someplace like California, a little bit of choice, surprisingly, but fewer options. And then oddly, you go to some of these, center of the country states, and there's not many choices. And I think some of that's just because it's really rural, and so they have a hard time, with some of that. But anyway, so that's what's going on with, I guess this is some of what's going on with education. So Lars, as running for president, and, what would you do on the issue of education, and how would you advocate, what would you advocate Congress to do, from the bully pulpit as well?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of from the bottom up government. So more local is better. I would like, less state and less federal government in your lives. So to that end, essentially, I think that the Department of Education is a total failure, that it doesn't know what's best for people in Kansas and people in Iowa and people in California, and people, everybody has a different ideas of what they want their kids to learn and how they want them to learn. And I think the federal government just coming in and putting this blanket over the top of everybody, basically, like you said, it just puts everybody in a box, and it makes everybody a conformist to learn a certain way. Our education system, living in California, as you guys do, I have a lot of friends who are teachers, and they're very upset with the system. They don't like the system. They think it's broken. They feel like that they're more of a babysitter and a policeman than they are an educator oftentimes. It's very telling when your kid is getting straight A's and is just completely crushing it in school, and they miss a day in school, and the school is flipping out. Where's the kid? Why isn't the kid in school? And I'm like, what does it matter? Did they miss a test? Did they, no, we need that kid in school because that's how we get our money. Like if they miss one day in California, they don't get paid that day, right? And so they don't care about educating your kid. They care about making sure your kid's in the system so they get their money, that's completely opposite of what the education system should be. And it kind of is telling of what the problem is all across the country. So abolishing the Department of Education is the first step as president, and then leaving it to each state to like deal with their own issues. And each state really should be looking at the successful states and emulating those proposals, basically.
Well, you know what? One thing that really jumped out at me from what you said, and that was the metrics issue, right? I mean, the idea that they're freaking out over whether or not your kid is in school because that's the metric that they're having, whether or not they're succeeding, right? I mean, they've got the butt in the seat, but they really can't tell, I mean, how well this person is doing, once they leave the classroom. So it's just kind of horrifying.
Well, you're not allowed to judge, right? So if you're not allowed to judge people, then can you educate them properly? That's right. You're not allowed to judge people's paths, which fair enough. We all learn at different rates and everything, but stop comparing children to other children and compare them to themselves. Is this child making progress? And we can actually have make some progress on education rather than, hey, your kid doesn't fit into the box. Well, of course not. Your box is stupid.
Well, one of the funny experiences I had too is when I was in high school, I felt very much like the way Lars was describing it as babysitting. I mean, that's what it felt like to me in the public school system. And consequently, I wasn't very interested and I wasn't showing up very much. They were probably very disappointed with me. not
same. I'm the same.
Yeah. But the crazy thing was when I went to community college, it was completely different. And I think the reason is because everybody in community college was there because they wanted to be there. And so there was a choice happening. Whereas,
you pay to be there, right? Yeah, so if you're going to pay to be there, then you're probably going to make an effort to make it worthwhile for you, right? And if it's not working for you, you're going to drop out, right? And that doesn't happen in the public system. It's just you're there whether it's working for you or not. And you're just going to suck it up because they need your money for you to be, like you said, in that chair, whether you want to be there or not. Right. And so, I had the exact same experiences. That high school was horrible. And I got to community college and I was like, oh, here's people that actually want to learn and they're going to actually teach me something and I'm paying for it. So I better make the best of it. Right.
Yeah. It's complete transformation for me.
Yeah. Anyway. Agreed.
Yeah. Well, this does bring us into another topic, and it's sad that this is the transition, but it's a transition on to identity politics because we see it happening so much in the schools. It's happening in a lot of other places too. But James, maybe I could get the visual on this. So all over the country, these different colleges and universities are ending their reliance on standardized testing. And it's just, it seems like the whole point of standardized testing is to try to have an objective measure to figure out whether or not somebody is likely to do well if they go into that college. And yet, the UC system sort of led the way in saying, hey, we don't like the makeup of the of what the essentially the melanin levels of the student body. We're not comfortable with it. Therefore, we don't like the metric that's leading to that. And so they decided to get rid of the SAT tests. And you see the same thing is now happening at California State University. That same thing is happening, and quite frankly, all over the country, they're starting to question whether or not they want to have this. So we see it happening in the schools, but also too, we see, this other crazy things happening in government as well. Like, for instance, in COVID policy, Biden was making it a very clear point that he was going to prioritize government help after locking you down and potentially ruining your business and shutting it down. Then he would say, okay, now if you want to come to me for help, I got to check your skin color first tell you your eligibility. And I mean, some of this stuff seems nuts. So, what do you think about this, Lars? I mean, because clearly if you manage to win the office, you're going to have to deal with some of the expectations on some of this stuff.
Yeah. I think culture war, identity politics, I feel like it's invented by the elites in Washington and pushed by the media, which is is backed by those elites, right? And I feel like it's basically just to keep us divided, to keep us arguing and fighting with each other, so that we're not paying any attention to them and what they're doing to us with, stealing our liberties and stealing our freedoms and pushing, the nanny state on us, right? It's like, as long as we're fighting about these issues, then we're distracted from what's really going on, which is they keep taking away our rights and keep foisting on us basically the nanny state to have us run our lives. Yeah, the education system is a mess, and it's I feel like, again, it's down to the individual level. If a state college or a community college feels the best way to identify their students is just to give them tests, then that's fine. But every area should have their own ideas of what is going to work for them and their community, and it shouldn't be judged by the federal government or handed down from on high. I think that doesn't work for me.
Well, yeah, I think ultimately this is kind of like a school choice type of thing. Just let all this experimentation happen. And if somebody picks a lousy metric, well, at least it only affects one or two schools instead of the whole system.
Yeah. It's a the free market, basically. If you allow education to be run by the free market, the best practices will come to the top. Right, the things that have the most success will come to the top. And one of the things I always say is, if you want the quality of service to go down and the cost to go up, just get government involved, right? and so that's what's happened with our education system, is that it's just gotten less and less service, poorer and poorer quality, and the cost is going up and up and up. And a lot of that is all the bureaucracy, right? All the middle management of education. If it was just left up to the teachers to teach, I think the system would work a lot better. But you have these layers of management that just leech all the money out of the system and basically suck all the air out of the system for the actual teachers who are doing the work, right? So I'd like to put more power back in the teachers' hands than all this administrative stuff. We have all these different school boards. Like in my county, we probably have 6 or 7 school boards. Do we really need that much administration, right? I mean, I feel like we could get rid of a lot of the administration and cut the cost dramatically, but that's not really a president thing. That's more of a local state kind of an issue, but it's something that I think about.
James, were you going to jump in, or?
Yes, but I forgot what I was going to say. So that's what happens at 8 o'clock in the morning. So there you go.
Just a Biden moment and impacted us. There you go. Well, speaking of Biden, Big Brother has kind of been a big issue, in government as of late. And one of the big issues that we're dealing with is this whole idea of the government deciding what is true information, what isn't true information. So, Jane, maybe you could bring up some of the stories here we have on Big Brother. So in this case, here we have a Reason article that talks about the Twitter files here. And you can see here Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger, and they were two of the journalists brought in to kind of uncover that. And quite frankly, we wouldn't even know a lot of this stuff if an entrepreneur hadn't bought Twitter, Elon Musk. I mean, if he hadn't gone in there and just bought it, for whatever his motives were, and then unearthed all this stuff, we'd still be sitting here being gaslighted by the government that everything that's happening, that, this supposed censorship that we think we're experiencing, but don't worry, you're not experiencing it. We actually had a little bit on this show too. We had a show we were doing on, I can't remember what it was called, the Innovation Race. And it had to do with intellectual property in China. And the show was literally blocked on the live stream. Now, we were able to show it after the live stream, but for whatever reason, they blocked it. And it was funny because it was divided. There was a prominent Democrat and a prominent Republican in the movie, and we were interviewing somebody from the show. But it was just, this is the kind of stuff that you're experiencing there. And that wasn't even a red-blue thing. That was just sort of a big trade China corporation type issue, So, but anyways, so we have that, and then of course we have the issue where Biden literally tried to get a Ministry of Truth in the Department of Homeland Security. So, he was clearly doing this covertly through Twitter and stuff, asking these social media companies to censor stuff he didn't like. But then they tried to do it overtly by having something where all these companies could then just look for a standard, and the government would set the standard on what was fake and what wasn't fake. And fortunately, we had enough sense as a country not to go along with that. But anyways, what do you think of this, Lars? I mean, to me, this seems to be the one of the biggest dangers of our time, the idea that we're having to deal with this.
Yeah, not only is it one of the biggest dangers of our time, but think about the Twitter files. Has anything really happened from that? Has there been any action or any legislation out of government or any real in-depth investigation into that? Really, I mean, it's right on the border of government suppression of speech, which is a fundamental right that we have. And it's clear that the government was in there meddling, right? And so why aren't these FBI agents, why aren't the agents that were in there meddling, have all those people been fired? Have you heard anything about it? No, there's nothing. It's just crickets out there, right? And it's like, and then we just get moved on to the next outrage that there is, and we forget all about the fact that the government was suppressing our speech, right? And that is a fundamental right. That's like that. When you start going down that road, you start to become China and Russia and North Korea and these places where it's totalitarian, authoritarian. They just tell you what you can say, how you can say it. I feel like this should be a much bigger issue than it is. And I would be looking as president to like hold these people accountable that did this. Like, why isn't the head of the FBI just fired? Like, this happened under your watch. Like, your whole job is to uphold the Constitution, and you're not doing that. And if you were a private company and you weren't doing your job, they fire you. But in Washington, maybe they move things around, or maybe they just cause some more drama to like direct your attention away to the other thing. Like I was talking about the culture war issues. They just make that stuff up to like redirect all your attention. There'll be some new thing, and the media is completely complicit with it, right? They push that propaganda, and people, like you said, only have 30 seconds to figure it out. That's what they're sitting down with their beer at night and watching the TV, and they basically just get whatever's put in front of them, right? And so we're in a really dangerous time where our liberties are being given up. I don't believe that we should give up liberty out of fear. And we're being asked to do that all the time, right? The Patriot Act, the Homeland Defense System, this new system that they're talking about, the Restrict Act over TikTok, right? And it's not about banning TikTok; it's about banning your freedoms, right? And so I'm opposed to all this stuff. It's just we need to get back to living our lives as best we can without government interfering and spying on us, the surveillance state, all that stuff needs to end. It's just, it doesn't really serve a purpose. Sure, it might call out a few bad actors, but everybody has to suffer because of a few people. And I feel like we should just live our lives without fear and move forward, right?
Yeah, well, whistleblowers get prosecuted while the people they blow the whistle on get rewarded, literally get promoted.
Yeah,
we're living in a back-assward world. It's insane. It literally is insane where those people whose supposed job is to protect our constitutional rights continually violate them and get rewarded, while those who expose them get trashed, if not prosecuted. Right?
Yep.
That's actually the scary part. And how many people just go along with it, are willing to just kind of blindly go along with it. I find scary.
Well, what could be more patriotic than Snowden sacrificing his future, his potentially his life, to tell the country that the government is lying to us? I mean, to me, I can't think of a more patriotic thing, and yet he is the one who has been exiled, and the person who was lying, that he showed was lying, nothing's happened to him. He's getting, he gets to be a highly paid person to come on, the Cult News Network, CNN. Some of these other
and he gets his pension and his
and that just shows you the power of the state, right? That just shows you the power of the state, that they can literally be called out for oppressing their own citizens, and then they just sweep it under the rug and make the guy a bad guy, right? Like that shouldn't happen. I personally, if I am president, I'll be pardoning Snowden, Assange, Albright. There's a list of like 15 people straight away. And there's a lot of people that have done the similar kind of things that don't have the notoriety that those guys have. And I'll be pardoning them too, because we need to not have fear that our government is going to come after us if we're telling the truth about our government, even if it's bad, right? Like, we need to be able to hear that. And as I said previously, we need to hold all these people accountable. When they're bad actors, they shouldn't get a free ride, right? If they're harming US citizens, they're attacking us. And so they need to be held accountable for that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of other issues in Big Brother, Big Brother wants yet more control over the currency. James, maybe you could bring up the visual on this. So CBDC, you may have heard of, and that's central bank digital currencies. Essentially they decided, okay, just going fiat and handing you paper money that says "In God We Trust" it isn't enough. Now they want to literally make it digital so that they can have yet more control and be able to turn off your ability to even spend the dollars. and we saw something like this similar to in the trucker protests in Canada, where it wasn't quite, the digital currency issue, but, people were trying to transfer these people money, and the Canadian government was able to get in there and shut it down. And certainly that would be a lot easier if the government absolutely controlled the digital currency. What do you think of this, Lars? It sounds like a huge threat.
Oh, I am absolutely. This is the horrible affront. It's a total authoritarian grab on us. Right now, 95% of all transactions are already digital. Only 5% of transactions happen in cash, right? So that is already the thing. The reason why CBDC is so much more horrible than the system that we have right now is that it gives the government transaction data. Every time you buy anything, it goes to the government, and they know everything you've bought. And if they decide that you're not worthy of purchasing that thing, they can just instantly turn you off. The other thing is that they can tax you in real time, right? They know every transaction that you did. There's no hiding anything. There's, the IRS system is just going to get even more intrusive. I don't want this, but this is going to happen. This is going to happen. There's really not anything that's going to stop this, unfortunately. I would like to see a system where we have digital currencies, which is what this is, but it's an abomination of digital currency. I like the decentralized idea of having many different currencies competing in the market, right? And let the market decide what the best currency is. Let the market decide the best way that we all want to transact together. And I'm sure that way is not going to be CBDC. That is not the one. That's not the one that's going to win, right? Like if you let a free and open market happen, but of course the government has control over stopping that, right? They're going to regulate the hell out of the other systems and promote their own system. And they're also feeling competition because China's doing this, other countries are doing this. They don't want to feel like they're left out or that they're missing the boat in some way. But this is another one of those paths that we just don't really want to be going down. I like the anonymity of cash when I want to have it. If I want to do a private transaction with you, I should be able to do that. And the government should have no overview of our transaction as long as it's legal and we're not harming other people.
Yeah. Well, hopefully a libertarian President Mapstead can throw a monkey wrench into those gears.
I will certainly try. Yes.
Well, going into some of the other mismanagement of the economy, talking about digital currency, let me take you into sort of our current status of some of the shame of some of the ways we've managed things over the past few decades. So here is a chart showing from 1922 to almost present day our debt, and you can see it's just crazy. We are going up leaps and bounds like there's no tomorrow. Maybe that is Biden's plan, that there's no tomorrow. I don't know. But anyways, the debt is just certainly out of control. And you can see this is our GDP growth on a separate chart. And you can see that it's only about 25 years of that. You can see a little bit of progress around 2008 when they had their housing
financial
bubble
crisis. Yeah,
exactly. And then they had a little bit of a hiccup there, and then of course COVID had a hiccup there. But what's more disturbing is when we're coming out of this, it's flattening out. Which is a big problem if we're trying to get out of all that debt. And here is putting those two together, the debt to GDP, and it's kind of nice. This is the Congressional Budget Office puts it out, and you can see over time, this shows you relative to the size of the economy how much debt we have. And you see, this is World War II right here, and this is, this was a huge spike. It was around 100% of debt to GDP. Well, we're at those levels today, and the CBO thinks we're going off into the stratosphere. So this is, buckle your seatbelts, because this is, kind of scary territory. And of course, this is inflation as well, which is something we're dealing with right now, too, because of, all of this magic money theory, or I guess is, fans like Krugman are probably, rooting for. I don't know. But anyways, this is just crazy times, it seems like we're in. Lars, how would you deal with some of these issues in the economy if you became president?
Well, two of the people that I voted for president before had this as one of their number one things, which was Ross Perot and Ron Paul, right? Ross Perot had all the charts that he brought out, and he had the infomercial, and he was telling everybody about how we were selling out our children's future, our grandchildren's future, right? And he was talking about probably like a $1 trillion debt, right? Now we're at $32 trillion, right? It's like, man, it is absolutely nuts. And the thing is, I often kind of think about it like Detroit, right? In Detroit, they had the declining auto industry. They had less and less income, but they still had all these services, and they kept adding on services and providing pensions and all these things, and they would just keep adding it on. The politicians would be like, yes, we passed that. Yes, we passed that. And eventually it came home to roost, and Detroit went bankrupt, right? And all the people got left holding the bag, right? All the people that had pensions, that worked for the fire department, the police department, all those people got stuck out, right? And the politicians that made all the rules, they didn't suffer because they were already gone, right? They were already out of office, right? And so we have the same kind of stupid crap going on in Washington, where essentially they have figured out that they have this endless bucket that they can try to keep pulling from. It's essentially for them, right? And because they're looking out in the future, and they're like, I'm not going to be here in 20 years. I don't care. I want to be reelected next time. So I'm just going to give the people what they want, which is a lot of handouts, right? And we now have almost 50% of people in some way in America are getting some kind of government assistance, right? And I think something like 20% of all employment is some kind of government agency, right? So we're becoming more and more dependent on the state, the federal government. And I don't see this ending anytime soon, because there's no consequence to them for this modern monetary theory. Just spend, it doesn't matter. And I've always said one of the ways that they're going to fix this problem and all the Social Security problems that they have is they're going to inflate their way out of it, right? They're going to promise you that we're going to pay you back your stuff, but by the time they get to paying back your stuff, it's only going to be 10 cents on the dollar, right? And so you're not going to be able to do anything with the money that they owe you, right? So, and they're going to do the same thing with their debt. If they inflate it away and essentially have to repay it with, less valuable dollars, I think that's one of the ways that they're going to do it. But unfortunately, that means that we all have to suffer, right? Because if they're inflating away our dollars, that means our buying power, our standard of living is declining at a rapid rate, right? And so I see this giant rise in debt in direct proportion to, you talk about income inequality, you talk about lowering of your standard of living, it's in direct proportion to this debt. This debt going up reduces everybody pays for it, right? Everybody's paying. We might not be paying out of our pocket, but we're paying in the form of a reduced standard of living. It's horrible. I want to balance the budget. I want to get our spending under control, and also streamline our tax system so that it's fairer and more voluntary, and we can all kind of understand what's going on, and then audit the Fed and end the Fed so that we can see where the hell our money's going and how much they have and what they're printing and all that kind of stuff. It's just a bunch of behind the scenes malarkey, and we need to end this stuff.
Yeah. Well, and the sad thing is too, if even if somehow from a central planner view, you think that's going to work, inflating the currency. The problem is you can't put the brakes on that very easy once you start that process. So it just destroys the economy.
Yeah, well, that's what they're doing right now, right? And they're going to drive us straight into a recession. I mean, it's I'll be very surprised if in the next year or two we're not in a recession due to all the tightening that they've done to combat inflation. The Fed just keeps doing these cycles, right? And it seems like the gyrations are getting harder and faster, and it's like at some point something's going to break, right? And we're seeing that in the banking system right now. The banking system is breaking because these guys are moving too fast, too quickly, and like you said, putting the brakes on too hard, and that's like the banks are crashing, right? And all that really does is drive the banks into more monopoly, so that there's only going to be one or two or three banks that you can do business with, right? Because the regulations are basically just put them all out of business.
Everything too big to fail. Yeah, that's terrible. But that shows us too, part of the reason the economy isn't doing as well also is because one of the big economic drivers we had just a few years ago was energy. And of course, in our crusade against climate change, which there's some legitimacy to some environmental concerns, but the idea that trade-offs, it seems like we've lost all sight of trade-offs. It's like a pipeline, if you are going to use a fossil fuel, is actually a more efficient way to transfer that fossil fuel. So I mean, there's different issues here going on that it just seems like we've lost sight of all trade-offs. But anyways, we got Biden's first step in office was to kill the Keystone Pipeline coming out of Canada that would have helped us to be more in North American energy independent. And of course, here's an article from the Los Angeles Times talking about sweeping changes that he's made to slow down oil production and such. And the crazy thing is that while he's doing all this and virtue signaling, he's running around the world trying to buy oil from all the places that have some of the worst dictators on earth. So, what do you think about all this stuff on energy and the environment, Lars?
Yeah. So, I am a big fan of nuclear energy. There's new kinds of energy coming out. Westinghouse just announced some smaller platform nuclear power plants that can be replace a bunch of the ones that we have, and the cost is much simpler or cheaper, and the time to produce them is quicker. There's new technology, thorium salt reactors. I don't know if you guys have looked into that. And then my big dream and hope for the world is nuclear fission. Harnessing the power of the sun essentially would create energy essentially for zero, right? And everything that we buy, everything that we do in our lives is touched by energy, right? And so Biden, I think, made a mistake we need energy independence in America because it's a national security issue. Right. It's we have tons of oil in the ground in America. We need to be accessing it. Obviously, we need to, be mindful of the environment. But like you said, the pipeline is actually more environmentally friendly than putting all the oil into trucks and driving the stuff, with a machine across the land and polluting the. So this is like one of those culture war issues or one of those partisan issues that it doesn't make a lot of sense, but they do it anyway because it panders to the constituency. So I would be in favor of more oil drilling, but in an environmentally conscious way. But I think nuclear is the much better route going forward. And there's of course there's a lot of fears. No one wants that in their backyard. No one wants radiation fallout. But these things have gotten a lot safer in the last 50 years. And it takes 30 years to build a nuclear power plant with all the regulations and whatnot. So the technology is going a lot faster than the time it takes to build these things. But like I said, Westinghouse just came out with a new smaller footprint that's much faster and cheaper to build. So I'm hopeful for that. And I'd like to see that for national security reasons. I'd like to see energy independence.
Well, it's funny, too, because nuclear is almost like the litmus test to find out if somebody is actually serious about climate change, because it clearly is a bridge, at least for the advanced countries, to be able to have nuclear power in the short run. And some of these countries are literally shutting down their nuclear power plants, the ones they already have up, which is just, absolutely nuts.
You're asking the same people who have put us in this position to make rational decisions.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and plus, energy independence is essentially like half the wars that we're in, half the things that we're doing all over the world is all about energy, right? It's all about, or resources, natural resources that we're basically fighting for or trying to gain control of. And so if we can like reduce our need for that, we can reduce a lot of the foreign action that we're taking. And I think that's a good thing, because I'm not a fan of foreign wars.
Yeah, exactly. All those interventions. But, well, in fact, I'll jump to the other topic first then, because talking about foreign wars, our footprint across the world is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, we have this article from Al Jazeera says we have over 750 bases in 80 countries. I've seen estimates as high as 1,000, but it just shows you they're all over the place. And it seems to me that, is that really defense, or is that like an empire? and then to top it off, currently we don't even seem to be able to manage it, right? I mean, okay, so from a libertarian perspective, yes, maybe we should start closing these down, but when Biden tries to close it down, it turns into an absolute disaster. I mean, we had people falling from planes as they flew off into the sky. I can't even imagine. And now he's involved in this whole Ukraine thing that he's got us into, which kind of boggles the mind. You got us out of Afghanistan only to get us into another place. And then apparently it sounds like we're kind of running out of ammunition. And yet he wants to, also confront China in Taiwan. And it just seems like this craziness of trying to control the whole world from the United States seems a little bit insane. What do you think about all that, Lars?
Yeah, I think that, a lot of the problems that we have around the world are, our own creation, essentially, right? We took 20 years of war. My buddy Michael White came up with this, and it's genius. We took 20 years of war to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. Right. And it's like, and we do this all the time. We'll put in our puppet that we want running a thing, and then when we're done with that puppet, or they are not behaving the way that we want to, we try to overthrow that puppet using the new puppet that it's ridiculous. Why is America doing this? It's serves no useful purpose. I think all it really does is piss countries off and people off all over the world. I think that the Taiwan issue, if we would just leave it alone, wouldn't be an issue. I don't think China's going to do anything to Taiwan. But I think if we keep, rattling our sabers and putting our ships over there and stirring the pot, then yeah, maybe something might happen, right? But I think that that's going to be on us. I don't feel like it's in their best interest to do anything with Taiwan. It's working fine for them right now, right? So I think we project a lot of our fears onto countries, and we project a lot of our fears of what they might do to us. But I think a lot of times that's just our fear, and that's not really what the reality is, right? And it's like, you guys probably grew up in the age where we had to duck and cover under the desks because the nuclear bombs were going to fall on us from Russia that was going to kill us. All my life I grew up thinking Russia was, the ultimate enemy. And then, we had the Berlin Wall fall. Right. And Russia broke apart. And why did that happen? Well, it was because capitalism basically showed everybody, hey, this is a better way of living. Right. I would rather show people like how to live and let them copy us than try to force our will on other people, because no one wants to be forced that. But if they see you're living a better life and they're like, well, I want that life too. Right. Then the people can be like, no, that's what we want. We don't want this anymore. Right. And so I think it's through showing our actions instead of telling people how they should behave. We should just show them and let them come to that conclusion themselves.
Well, and if we had left, like you said, in Taiwan, if we had left them alone quite a while ago, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, they might have all formed an alliance over there that could check China at this point. But, we decided we were going to be the manager over there, and now we're kind of waffling. So it's crazy. But speaking of another area we've mismanaged, and that is homelessness. James, can you pull up the visual real quick? So California, it's a disaster. It's bad in a lot of places in the country, but California is particularly bad. And these are some pictures. This shows just kind of a ubiquitous scene that you might see in a lot of places in California right now. Here's an article near San Francisco that talked about some crazy 2-mile line of people parking their campers and trailers along a road. It's just out of hand. And of course, HUD has numbers showing, California certainly worse than most. It tends to be more of a blue state problem, but there are a few red states that are significant too, like Alaska. What would a President Lars do on homelessness?
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's a lot that the president can do on homelessness. But one of the big things that I feel is a contributor to homelessness is drugs, and so I'd like to end the war on drugs. I'd like to deschedule the drugs that are there. I feel like prohibition just breeds more of the same activity, and it breeds a lot of underground activity, and we need to get people help, right? I'm actually been sober for 36 years myself, so I know what some of these people are going through and the hard times that they're going through, and it's not an easy problem to solve. It's something that I've thought about a lot since I live in California, right? And I feel like as long as people aren't harming people, if you're homeless and you're not harming someone, I don't really have a problem with that. If you need to sleep on a public park, I don't really have a problem with that. But what I do have a problem with is if you're coming into my house and taking my stuff to feed your drug habit, that I got a problem with, right? And I feel like I call it compassionate enabling, right? It's that we want to help people, but we actually harm people more by giving them help oftentimes, right? It's like, and then also turning a blind eye, right, to legal stuff. It's like, oh, well, they stole that, but it's not worth our time to put them in jail because of whatever, which just leads to moral hazard and just breeds more of that kind of behavior, right? So I think we need to hold people accountable. We need to get people help if they want it, to get off the drugs and alcohol that they're on, because that's a big part of homelessness. I know in Santa Cruz where I live, there was a study done, and it was something like 65 to 70% of all people who were homeless had some kind of substance abuse problem. So I feel like that's the big elephant in the room that no one really talks about. And I think the drug war is a big part of that problem. We've had a 50-year war on drugs, and there's more people doing drugs today than there ever was in my entire life, right? It's failed. It does not work, right? And so we need to just throw that out completely, start over, and focus more on education and treatment than on putting people in prison for, smoking a marijuana joint or something like that.
Yeah. It does seem like we go back and forth on this stuff, where not only do we prohibition on it, but then our government, like here in California, we were literally handing out free drugs too during the COVID crisis. So it's just like the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, and it's just all a mess in the end. But we're just about out of time. Let me get to our last topic here. So gun control. We've had quite a few issues of mass shootings lately. This is just a chart from Statista. I guess it's by year, mass shooting counts as 4 or more people in this statistic that are killed in a particular, I think, or maybe it's shot or killed, I'm not sure which, but in a particular shooting. It says fatalities, yeah. And so anyways, we just saw there was one in Texas the other day. There was the one in Tennessee. So we're seeing quite a few of these things. But on the flip side of things, guns do prevent a fair amount of gun violence as well. And oddly, the government wants to shut down that information. So, the CDC was doing a study on this stuff that was showing a lot of people were actually defending themselves and had prevented gun violence with guns. And the CDC decided to hide that study. Anyways, clearly, this is a contentious issue. How would President Mapstead look at this?
Yeah, well, I don't believe there should be federal gun laws. And I don't believe that prohibition works. It didn't work with alcohol. We had a constitutional amendment for that. We got rid of that. It didn't work. It doesn't work on drugs. It doesn't work with guns. It doesn't work with people. When you're prohibiting people from coming across the border, it doesn't work, because we have 3 million people came across the border, right? But we prohibit it, right? There's a ban on it, and it doesn't work. And so I don't believe that outlawing guns or certain types of guns is going to fix this problem, because I feel like it's a cultural issue, right? This is a lot of these mass shootings is essentially a public suicide. The person wants to kill themselves. They want to be out, and they want to take out as many people as they can before they go out, right? A lot of times they end up dead, and that's because that's what they want, right? And I heard something really interesting the other day on Larry Sharp's show. A guy was basically saying that we're not going to have an uprising. We're not going to have a new rebellion in America. What we're having is these types of issues. This is essentially what comes out of people being so fed up with the system. They don't feel like the system is working for them, and they don't feel like there's any hope of getting the system to change. And so they go out with a bang, right? And so I don't think that fixing gun laws is going to change this, because if the person wants to go out like that, they can get in a car and they can run over 50 people walking down the street, right? And I think that would just be the thing that switches. So I feel like I understand where people are at. I hate seeing people die. I hate seeing people, and especially children, die. That's horrible, right? But I just honestly, in my heart of hearts, believe that getting rid of guns or banning guns is not going to fix this problem. It's a cultural issue, and I think, I'm not in favor of federal gun laws.
Yeah, dealing with gun violence, you get rid of the gun, you still have the violence, right? You still have the desire to commit violence. And when you have people who are determined to make the world feel their pain, which is what a lot of these happens, is people want the world to feel their pain, they're going to make the world feel their pain somehow, some way. And so, short-circuiting that or dealing with that before it becomes an issue. Let's start. A lot of these people, I warned about this a couple of years ago. You're going to put people under pressure who are not used to being under pressure, and they will crack.
Yeah. There's also another thing. If you look, America is the number one user of antidepressants in the world as a country. More people are on antidepressants in America per capita than any other country that there is. And a lot of these mass shootings, if you look, a lot of the people are on some form of antidepressant. And I haven't really seen anybody talking about that or looking into studies about that, but there are issues with antidepressants and feeling out of sorts or feeling suicidal. You hear a lot of people have that issue, and so maybe that is one of the reasons why we're seeing such a big influx of this is the heavy use of antidepressants in America.
Well,
and
antidepressants can be very weird. I took some for a while, and for me, it made you not care about anything. Right? You weren't depressed anymore, but you weren't happy anymore either.
Right.
And that's a difficult way to live as well. And so, this is like we said, this is a complex issue, and simplifying it into guns or mental health, making it overly simplified is part of the problem we're facing.
But it's easy to sell people on that, right?
Yeah.
People are looking for a solution, and that's the solution that seems to be the one that would work the best for most people, right? That's the solution. But I am not convinced at all that taking away people's guns is going to do that. Just as I'm not convinced that the Patriot Act was useful, or that the Restrict Act would be useful. That basically taking away people's rights so that we can reduce our fears, I don't think is a good path to go down ever. I think that freedom and our rights are more important than our fears.
Yeah, we've seen that, right? The desire to do something has caused all kinds of problems. It's caused problems with COVID response. It causes problems with homelessness response. Whatever, pick your issue. The desire to do something and run that with emotions rather than, okay, we want to do something about this. Let's calmly think it through. But instead we act on emotions and simple and overly simplistic solutions. So, all right.
Well,
I'm off my soapbox now. So,
I was going to say one of the added things to all this too that might be dividing us on some of this stuff is that, as government gets bigger, I mean, you can kind of track all those mass shootings going up as government also has a bigger footprint in our lives. And as government has a bigger footprint in our lives, everything becomes a zero-sum game. I mean, if the other side wins, that means you lose on a lot more things. If you're not, because you vote for one person, and that's a whole market basket of things together that you're getting. So the stakes become higher and higher the bigger and bigger government gets. So maybe that's part of what's driving some of this too. I don't know, but
a lot of people love government coercion when it serves their purpose and and puts down the other side and gives them the moral high ground, but they hate government coercion when it's used against them, right? And so, and I believe that the division we have in America is essentially government coercion, is this use of force by the government to insert your will, your beliefs, and your ideas on another group of people. That just always ends up poorly, right? And so I feel like if we reduce the government and we reduce the level of coercion, we'll reduce the division in America. And that, I truly believe that.
Well, that certainly sounds like a great note to wrap up on. So we've gone through all of our issues. Lars, we'll bring up your webpage again here. Did you want to say any last words about the campaign before we check out?
Yeah. So, you can find me at lars24.com, on social media. I'm on Facebook, Lars for President. On Twitter, I'm Libertarian Lars. Like we talked about earlier, fundraising is really challenging, right? It's one of the biggest challenges that I've come across. And so I'm looking for donors who would help me project my message out to the people. Like I said, I've reached 23 million people on Facebook. And in order to continue to expand that reach, I need to do advertising to get more followers. And so I'm looking for financial help in that regard. I'm just looking forward to spreading our message and helping the Libertarian Party move forward with several plans. I have the Lars 24 challenge, which challenges all Libertarian voters to get one new registered Libertarian voter. And if we all do that, we can double the size of the party. I'm working on that Go Gold thing that I talked to you about, which it helps all candidates raise funds across the country, and then supporting our local candidates and spreading our message, because the president for Libertarian Party is about fundraising and spreading our message, and is the biggest driver of new growth for the party. And those are the things that I'm really focused on.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Lars. And again, if you want to check out more on Lars' specifics on the campaign, we did another show with him. You can go check that one out as well. Again, thanks for joining us today out there. And until next time, stay tuned and stay free.
Thank you.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.